Ikigai is whatever makes your life feel worth living. That is the whole word. It does not have to be your job. It does not have to pay, and it does not have to impress anyone. So here is what to do tonight, before any of the history. Write down one noun that makes tomorrow worth entering. Then write the hour you will meet it. 9 in the morning, stretch in the sun. That is an ikigai. You do not have to qualify for it. The noun is the source. A person, a job, a garden, a Thursday visit. The feeling that tomorrow is worth entering is a separate thing, and you can keep the source and still lose the feeling, which is why hunting for one perfect purpose so often fails. That is the whole idea. There is no chart in it, and yet you have almost certainly seen the chart. 4 circles. What you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you can be paid for, with Ikigai sitting alone in the middle where all 4 overlap. So in the next 15 minutes, 4 things. Where that picture actually came from, and it is not Japan. The psychiatrist who built the real idea in a place you would not expect. What happened when researchers asked 43,000 people a single question about it? And a 5-minute version you can do tonight with a sheet of paper. Start with the word, because it is smaller than the chart makes it look. Iki is connected to living. Gai carries the sense of worth or value. Put the two together, and you land close to what makes life worth living. Does worth have to mean money? Ordinary Japanese usage says no, and the Japanese government's own public explanation of Ikigai lists children, friends, work, and hobbies as examples. Notice how ordinary that list is. Work appears beside relationships and leisure, not above them. A grandparent may name a grandchild. A retired machinist may name a garden. Someone recovering from illness may name the friend who visits every Thursday. None of those answers becomes less real because nobody would pay for it. Now hold that beside the picture. Miss one circle and the chart says you have not arrived. A woman who loves painting but paints badly fails. A caregiver whose work matters but earns no wage fails. Would you call either of those lives meaningless? Ordinary Japanese usage puts no entrance exam in front of a meaningful life. The chart does. Which raises the obvious question. If the diagram is not Japanese, who drew it? The paper trail is short and nobody hit it. It begins in Spain, around 2011, with André Zuzunaga, a Spanish author and astrologer who drew 4 overlapping areas as a way of thinking about propositu, the Spanish word for purpose. The labels were already there. What you love, what you do well, what the world needs, and what someone will pay for. The overlaps produced passion, mission, vocation, and profession. There was nothing deceptive about that drawing. It was a Western purpose model, presented as a Western purpose model. Then, in 2014, a British blogger named Mark Wynne heard the Japanese word ikigai in a talk by Dan Buettner, the American author who studies long-lived populations. Wynne was looking at a translated copy of that purpose diagram. He saw a connection, and he typed ikigai into the middle of it. Years later, he described what he had done with unusual honesty. He had merged 2 concepts and changed 1 word on a picture. That edit proved extraordinarily shareable because the clean symmetry solved a real problem. An unfamiliar Japanese idea could suddenly be understood in about 4 seconds. But visual clarity is not historical authenticity. Reposted enough times without its chain of custody, the picture gave nobody any reason to suspect that the geometry was Spanish, the label was British, and the career requirements came from neither Japan nor Japanese psychology. No conspiracy was required, and look at what the swap changed, because this is the part that reaches you. Purpose can reasonably describe a career intersection. Ikigai is allowed to be small, private, unpaid, and temporary. When the chart insists on all 4 conditions at once, it quietly converts a broad source of life value into a rare professional achievement. And then that demand follows you home. Instead of noticing what already gives your day some texture, you start auditing every pleasure for whether it could become a calling. The hobby should become a side business. The skill should solve a social problem. The job should express your entire self, Have you ever quit something you loved because you were not exceptional at it? So should you throw the circles away? Not if they help you think about work, what you enjoy, what you are skilled at, what people need, and what can pay your rent are four sensible career questions. They turn harmful only at the center, where the chart tells you an unpaid pleasure or an ordinary relationship cannot make a life worth living. The woman who actually built the idea was not thinking about careers at all. She was on an island. Her name was Mayako Kamiya, a Japanese psychiatrist born in 1914 who studied the psychology of a life worth living. Kamiya was educated in Geneva at a school associated with the Jean-Jacques Rousseau Institute, then trained in medicine and psychiatry, and she translated literature and philosophy across several languages. In the 1950s, she began working with patients at Nagashima Eisein, a national Hansen's disease sanatorium on an island in Japan's Seto Inland Sea. That place matters, so do not skip past it. Under a law passed in 1931, Japan enforced absolute segregation of people with Hansen's disease. Once called leprosy, patients were removed from ordinary society and kept there, and the policy continued long after medicine had stopped justifying it. The law was not repealed until 1996, so the people Kamiya sat with had lost their health, their homes, their work, their families, and their public identity, all by government order. What question would you ask a person in that position? Kamiya asked what still made tomorrow worth entering, and later accounts of her research describe a pattern she did not expect. Physical condition alone did not predict who still felt that life was worth living. Some people in terrible circumstances kept a clear pull toward the next morning. Others, whose symptoms were milder, felt emptied of it. What separated them? She spent years on that difference, and in 1966, she published Ikigai ni Suite, usually rendered in English as On the Meaning of Life. The book that gave the world this word has still never been published in English. Kamiya is often compared to Viktor Frankl, the Viennese psychiatrist whose writing on meaning was shaped by his survival of the concentration camps. But the two questions differ. Frankl asked how meaning could carry a person through extreme suffering. Kamiya asks something more clinical, how the felt value of life disappears, which needs are injured when it goes, and how a sense of worth can slowly return. She described 7 of those needs. English summaries word them differently, but they run roughly like this: satisfaction with life, change and growth, a hopeful future, resonance with other people, freedom, self-realization, and a sense of meaning or value. Do not treat that as 7 boxes you must keep full. Treat it as a vocabulary. A man can be comfortable and still feel stuck because nothing is changing. He can be busy and still feel invisible because nothing he does reaches another person. When your own week feels flat, which of those 7 is actually missing? Kamiya is also where that split between the noun and the feeling comes from, and it is the part the chart cannot show you. The felt sense that daily life is worth living has its own name in Japanese, Ikigai-kan. Picture a man who says his family is his Ikigai, and who is also exhausted, isolated, and unable to feel close to them. The source is right there in the house. The sensation has gone quiet. Now picture a woman whose career organized every single day until retirement removed the title, the colleagues, the deadlines, and the evidence of usefulness all at once. That source is gone. Her capacity for Ikigai did not leave with the office key, and it may reorganize around teaching a neighbor, or a weekly breakfast, or a half-finished model ship. So sources come several at a time, and they overlap, weaken, vanish, and get replaced, which sounds more like an actual human life to you. One perfect purpose, or a handful of small reasons that shift as you do. And when you ask people in Japan what theirs actually is, the answers are not ambitious at all. In national survey work, family comes first at around 44%. Hobbies follow at about 33%. Work sits near 31%. Read that again. The circle the Western chart treats as the goal is the one Japan ranks last. Fine. But does any of this show up in something harder than philosophy? It shows up in mortality data. In late 1994, researchers in rural Miyagi Prefecture in northeastern Japan asked 43,391 adults a single question: do you have Ikigai in your life? 7 years later, 3,048 of them were dead. Public health researcher Toshimasa Sone and the Osaki study team published the analysis in 2008 after adjusting for age, smoking, alcohol, exercise, perceived stress, medical history, and other differences. The people who had answered no showed a 50% higher risk of death from any cause. The excess appeared in cardiovascular deaths and in external causes, and not as a statistically significant increase in cancer. The second team, led by epidemiologist Kozo Tano, followed more than 73,000 Japanese adults for an average of 12.5 years and reported a similar association with lower all-cause mortality. Now the sentence that has to be said out loud: association is not a cure. These studies do not show that finding a hobby prevents death. Poor health, depression, isolation, or financial strain can drain a person's sense of purpose and raise their health risks at the same time. And no statistical adjustment turns an observational survey into a prescription. So why does it matter at all? Because of how little the researchers asked for. They did not ask whether anyone had completed a purpose course, found an ideal career, or practiced 10 habits. They asked whether a person felt they had Ikigai, and that one subjective answer quietly gathered up mental health, social connection, daily activity, hope, and physical condition into a single word. A question that Broad had no business predicting anything. It did anyway. Which brings you back to the noun and the hour and how to choose them honestly. There is no ancient worksheet. Japanese sources do not hand you a ritual that reveals your Ikigai in an afternoon. And the neuroscientist Ken Mogi, who writes about Ikigai for English readers, offers 5 pillars that are conditions rather than a treasure map. Start small, release yourself, seek harmony and sustainability. Notice the joy of little things and stay in the here and now. Every one of those lowers the entrance fee instead of raising it. So take a sheet of paper and score 5 statements from 0 to 2, where 0 means not true this week, 1 means sometimes, and 2 means clearly true. This is not a validated test, and it is not a Japanese tradition. It is a 5-minute reflection built from the themes you just heard. 1. I can name one specific reason to get up tomorrow. 2. At least once this week, I got absorbed in something instead of just trying to finish it. 3. Someone expects my presence, my help, or my attention. 4. One small thing in my life is still growing because I keep returning to it. 5. At least one meaningful part of my day feels chosen rather than imposed. Then ignore the total. A total is a verdict, and a verdict is useless to you. Find the lowest line, because the lowest line is an experiment. If line 1 is lowest, put one named event on tomorrow's calendar. Not be productive, but walk at 9, or call Daniel, or sand the chair. If line 3 is lowest, send one message that creates a real appointment with another person. If line 4 is lowest, pick something small enough to repeat for 7 days. Would any of that solve a life? No. That is exactly why it is believable. And skip the affirmations that ask you to announce things that are not true yet. In a major review, psychologists Jeffrey Cohen and David Sherman describe what self-affirmation studies actually ask people to do. And it is not insisting that you are fearless or already healed. It is reflecting on your core values. So use a line your next action can make true. My worth is not measured only by my work. Then write that action underneath it and give it an hour and a place. I have found my purpose demands a feeling you may not have tonight. At 9 tomorrow I will water the seedlings creates a fact, and enough facts give the feeling somewhere to come back to. That is the version of Ikigai nobody can sell you, because there is no center to arrive at and no circle you can fail. It can be your work, and it can survive your retirement. It can be a person, and it can be rebuilt after you lose them. It can be important without ever once being impressive. So write the noun and write the hour. Nothing about that answer has to satisfy 4 circles drawn by a Spanish astrologer and relabeled by a British blogger. Because whatever makes your life feel worth living was always the whole word. Next, the village in northern Okinawa, where two Western authors spent 1 week and came home with the famous 10 rules of Ikigai, and how much of that list a Japanese researcher would actually recognize. Subscribe, and it will find you.